Hello and welcome to AthleticDirectorU. I'm Bryan Fischer here at the 2025 NCAA Convention in Nashville, where we're joined by Southern Conference Commissioner Michael Cross. Michael, thank you so much for stopping by.
Great to be here, Bryan. Good to see you.
Interesting times here at the NCAA Convention, and I'm curious if you while we're here, think back to your own days as a student athlete and maybe thinking about the position that your student athletes are in your conference are, given the decisions that are going to happen at this place right here.
Well, I played in a way different era. The idea that we would be paying student athletes, we'd be recognizing their name, image, and likeness rights, all those types of things. That would be just, if you were to transport somebody from that era to right now and not, see all the evolution, they would be blown away at where we've wound up. And very, very different era, very, very different experience. The television exposure has changed so much. And I had a great playing career in terms of the experience. And I really, I'm appreciative of that opportunity and what it provided to me. And I think that experience is changing, honestly. It seems more transactional. We need to make sure we continue to emphasize and reinforce the educational aspect of what college athletics is supposed to be about. And as long as we can retain that core, I think we'll wind up in a good place when it's all said and done.
When you do go on campus, when you're talking with your student athletes in your conference, when you're handing out championships to them, what's the biggest thing that they are telling you about their experience right now?
So it's interesting. I mean, we're not immune from the transfer portal dynamic. We have, and the transfer portal goes both ways. We've got people who obviously leave and we have people who come join us. What I hear very consistently from our athletes that have joined the Southern Conference is that whether it's coming in as freshmen or as transfers, they like the balance of the experience that we have. They like the ability to compete at the highest level, but they simultaneously are able to be the student component of the student athlete in the ways that I think everybody envisions around what college athletics is supposed to be about. So they come in, they're able to major in what they want to major in, they're able to be involved in other activities on campus, they're able to have a life that has athletics as a central piece of it, but isn't the only piece of it. And that is a really core component of what the Southern Conference is about, and we take pride in that.
I mean, you have so many unique institutions in your league. You have public, you have private, you have military academies. Mm-hmm. How do you make sure that experience is consistent for a lot of your student athletes?
Well, the institutions are providing the experience. I mean, and when you're selecting one of those institutions, you're choosing it for a very specific reason. You might be choosing it because you want a military type experience. You might be choosing it because of a particular major. You might be choosing it because of a coach. So all of those pieces come into play. What we really think about from a championship perspective, from a conference perspective, is let's make sure we're treating our athletes equitably. Let's make sure we're providing great championship experiences. We currently have a policy where all of our teams go to postseason at all of our sports. So you're going to get that when you come to the Southern Conference. You're going to get that postseason opportunity. We'll see if that continues to be the case as we move forward because of some of the dynamics from an expense standpoint that we've got to figure out as we try to compete in this new world order. But we take great pride in the types of experience we offer our student athletes, and we are continuing to figure out can we provide more and more neutral site type destinations for our championship experiences for our student athletes.
What surprised you as you've evolved in this role? What surprised you about being a commissioner right now?
The speed with which we have arrived where we are has been quite remarkable. If you would have said when I took this job, 18 months ago, this is where we would be, I would have been quite surprised. And trying to figure out with some direction, we'll call compass, not roadmap, where we're headed is really one of the key components of what we've got to figure out. So that's been very, very notable. I think the other thing, and this comes from my time on campus, and all of my career prior to this role was on campuses, is I always have to keep in the back of my head the incredible pressures that our schools are under from an enrollment standpoint. Our leaders are under pressure from donors. We're trying to figure out how do you compete at the highest levels, and all of those types of things that come with that dynamic continue to be incredibly important in moving us forward as a conference and trying to get some consensus or ideally unanimity between 4 public institutions, 4 private institutions, and 2 military institutions, which I think have all similar values, but have different ideas of how to get to where they want to be competitively and educationally.
How do you work with your schools to build that consensus? Because that seems getting everybody on the same page can be difficult at times, but also that is your chief job kind of as commissioner.
Yeah, so a lot of conversations. I mean, this is a relationship building job. Last year, my first year, I did about 27,000 miles worth of driving. And I'm fortunate, all of my schools are within driving distance of our office in Spartanburg, South Carolina. So, but it's conversations with the ADs, it's conversations with the SWAs, it's certainly conversations with the CEOs, it's conversations with the faculty athletics representatives. So, there's all different constituencies and all different perspectives about where we need to go. And it's a lot of listening, and it's a lot of note taking, and it's a lot of saying, okay, I'm hearing that this is where people are really trying to lean as it relates to what do we do with the settlement? How do we figure out how we're going to opt in or not opt in? What are we going to do with governance? What do we want to do with our championships? So you take those things, try and synthesize it in a very simple way that's easily digestible, easily understood, and then put it back out there for consideration as a bylaw proposal and go from there. So.
Has how you make decisions as a leader, has that changed in this role compared to when you might have been on campus and you might have been very narrow in your scope in terms of decision making? Has that changed?
It has. It has in the following way. Like, as my background and training has always been to try and think about athletics as part of the educational experience, and so being a part of the institution and not just an isolated island is something that's core to how I believe athletics should work. So that hasn't been a change. But the big thing is the need to build consensus. I don't get a vote in the vast majority of the things we do. And so our schools have to come together around the areas where they have concern to either increase competitiveness, change it, values, sportsmanship, officiating, investments in technology. All of those things is really about working to make sure everybody understands the issue completely. And I try to understand it from all perspectives, make sure everybody's well prepared and well educated about those things, and then get them to a stage where they say, okay, let's make a decision and move forward. And so the consensus building, the conversations, that has been the biggest change. When you're an athletic director, a lot of times you just make a decision and move on, and you get to operate with, I think, a lot less input from others if that's how you choose to navigate the world. I think a conference commissioner's got to think about it very differently and make sure you've got the perspectives of all of your constituents. And in my case, I have 10, which is pretty manageable, but some people have 16 and more, so that's a lot.
When you think back to your time before you joined the SoCon, you were obviously at the Knight Commission. How much did that help you prepare for a lot of the issues that you're facing now as commissioner?
The Knight Commission was an incredible time of preparation. There's actually some things from a communication standpoint that Amy Perko, the CEO, does incredibly well there as it relates to communicating to the Knight Commission board. And so I've adopted some of those things and used them very regularly within our conference. And I think it's set us up well in terms of having well-organized meetings, making sure we're giving communication out to the CEOs in particular who have a lot of things coming at them. So that's been one thing I've taken away from it. And then from a values standpoint, the values of the Knight Commission fit well with who I am as a person, who we are as a conference and a group of institutions. And so that really becomes an incredible formative piece for us. And we were very proud and honored to have been awarded a Knight Commission Care Champion award this year. One of 3 conferences to receive it in their inaugural year. And we take great pride in that. We're proud of the way we use our resources to support student athletes. And we're simultaneously very proud of the fact that we've declared publicly we are going to make sure that the revenue that we distribute from basketball is going to be equal between men's and women's basketball when those units come in and we're having success.
Speaking of women's basketball, I think everybody's looking at women's athletics in the college space as a growing part of really the athletic experience overall at these universities. How are you talking about growing that, supporting that on campus and beyond?
So women's basketball in our conference, we've got some steps forward that we need to take. The investment has been a little different. The other challenge that we've got is we don't have 10 women's basketball playing institutions. Like, we have 10 conference members, but I have 2 schools that don't play women's basketball at all. So trying to figure out what that looks like for an 8-team conference, trying to fill schedules, some of those types of things is a challenge. And but our athletic directors are committed to success in the sport. And ultimately, I think we're going to be in a place where we figure out how do we want to think about that sport going forward, and how do we want to think about, honestly, all of our sports. The time that we are putting in right now as the settlement comes down the path to figure out what sports should we emphasize, what sports do we have collective agreement around, and then what sports are we saying, you know what, we want the experience to be great, but we're not going to keep spending ourselves into oblivion for results that really aren't going to translate to the national level is something that we've got to get some time on.
When you're speaking of the national level, I think from an outside perspective, a lot of fans might, if they're not fans of one of your institutions, they might be looking at those power programs, and what they are dealing with. What's the one thing that you're dealing with that is local to the SoCon that you say, this is something that other people need to be talking about as well?
The local piece for us really has to do with having the willingness to say, this is the type of experience we want to provide, and not getting distracted by shiny objects over here related to how can I go and pay athletes more. And I don't want to give the impression we're not in the collective environment, because we are. Our teams are doing those things. Our schools are doing those things. We will have half of our schools probably at least opt in when it's all said and done from the SoCon. But at the end of the day, we're not going to outspend a whole host of institutions that we're competing against. So our experience and our approach has to be different, has to continue to focus on the educational dynamic. And you asked the question earlier about, what do I hear from our student athletes? They care about that. And I believe there are a lot of student athletes that do care about that. And so there are places in this country, there are schools in this country, and there are conferences in this country that will provide that type of experience. We are one of those places, and we're going to continue to lean into that piece of the equation while simultaneously doing the types of things that allow us to be competitive in select sports and allow us to provide the compensation that allows you to attract, the right type of talent to be successful.
How do you deal with that friction between, especially the autonomous four programs that, are kind of doing their own thing at this point versus what you want to deliver at the FCS level?
I don't know that I would necessarily describe it as friction. I don't live the life that the A4 commissioners do. They've got a very, very different business dynamic. And I'm reminded of that when our institutions in football go and play at an SEC or an ACC school. So, when we go and play at Auburn or we go play at Tennessee, we take a bye game, we appreciate those opportunities and they matter. And the scope and scale of what they do is 10x easily what our schools are doing. But I point that out for the following reason. It's really notable that at the end of the day, our institutions and those level institutions can meet on the playing field. And as we talk about what the future of the NCAA is going to be, and there's this whole thing about, hey, are we going to split? What's it going to look like? I go back to the Olympic piece. A lot of people talk about the Olympics. We've got 75 plus sports across summer and winter games. We've got 100 countries competing. And you've got different NGBs, you've got different levels of resources, you've got geographic advantages and disadvantages, and somehow everybody comes together every 4 years and they hand out gold medals. We can do the same thing in college athletics. I think there really needs to be three things that are shared governance issues. Championship access, revenue distribution, and that we've got the same playing field. I want 5 team players on my basketball team, you should have 5 on yours, and let's all use 10-foot rims, not give somebody a higher rim and a lower rim. After that, I get that the Autonomy 4 wants to do their thing, and they should. I want the same autonomy. I want the same ability to make our decisions in a different group of schools, and let's just come together and agree to meet on the playing field and decide who's better and decide whose model is better. And that shouldn't be based on the biggest budget. If the biggest budget dictated the terms of who was going to win, we wouldn't have to play the games. You just go figure out who's got the biggest budget. You don't have to play. That's why sports is great, because you have to actually go and prove it time and time again. And that's what we need to retain. That's what's made Division I great. It's what's made March Madness an incredible phenomenon and cultural touch point in March. We need to continue to push those ideas. And other areas where we're saying, hey, let's govern, let's legislate, let's restrict, let's spend lots of money on compliance. I think the world has changed significantly, and we don't need to be putting as much time into those things as we once did. The model has changed significantly, and we need to have a really candid conversation about what that's going to look like going forward.
How do you help your schools navigate kind of that push and pull between wanting to be competitive with a lot of their peers above them, but also understanding that, hey, we got to be right-sized in terms of our resources and what we're doing with them?
I think they understand it already, honestly. I mean, they live their existences day to day with their budgets. You know, they understand what they're going up against when they go into other institutions and compete against them outside of our conference. I think they also like that when they're within conference play in the SoCon, they know that they're on a generally level playing field, and that for the most part, not every sport, FCS football would be a notable example, but for the most part, we're competing for a single bid to get to the NCAA championship. We've got some golf examples where we could take multiple teams, baseball on occasion, soccer on occasion, but those are not going to be the norm necessarily. And so understanding who your peers are, what neighborhood am I living in? How does my house look to everybody else in the neighborhood, and how do they look to us? Who you surround yourself with really matters in this day and age. And we're fortunate we've had 10 plus years now of stable membership in the SoCon. I hope that continues. I mean, it's always a tenuous time, and an interesting question as to whether or not that'll happen. But we really have great leadership in our conference. It's a very collegial group. It makes a big difference. And there was a time where this idea of a bus league was a really negative connotation. We're a bus league, and honestly, I'll wear it proudly. Like our teams do not have to get in planes to go and play. They're not going coast to coast. We're not coming up with exotic examples of, geez, it really is better to be studying in a plane. It can be helpful. Like, come on, that's a tough experience for the athletes. We don't have that experience. We're going to go on the road. We're going to play against the best in non-conference play, but conference play where you're spending the majority of your time, it's all here. It's all right within our footprint. And continuing to maintain that focus is core to what we're trying to do, for sure.
Well, you mentioned being a bus league and wearing that proudly.
Yeah.
What is the thing that you actually like to do when you are on the road that relates to athletics? Are you listening to books on tape about leadership? Are you doing something while you are spending that time in the car or on a bus to go to your institutions that reflects well in your current career? It's a good. I don't know if this reflects well in my career, but there's two things I really spend my time on. One, I try to book a lot of calls during my car time. And for the most part, the cell reception's pretty good unless you're going through a national park, so that can get a little sketchy. But other than that, I try to have conversations with ADs, to have conversations, honestly, with industry vendors. Like, there's an incredible number of good ideas out there that can help people do these incredibly difficult jobs, and I try to educate myself about what's happening out there. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is it's either Spotify or I love the Sirius XM. I'm listening to First Wave. I'm listening to some alternative music. That's where I'm spending my time. So sometimes I clear my head. Every once in a while, I just turn it off and just have quiet. So, because it doesn't happen very often otherwise. Do you find yourself trying to make those big decisions in a lot of those car rides to come to that clarity of a decision?
It's not the making the decision. It's the processing of the information. It's hard to carve out time to think. I mean, if you talk to people in these roles, I mean, even walking around the convention here, you watch people and their body language and how they move through. Like, they've got a lot of pressure, and everything, particularly on campuses, it's a crisis a minute. This coach is leaving. This donor needs something. The president wants something else. This athlete might transfer. Like, it is a constant stream of largely bad news, and finding windows of time to simply take the information that you have and let your subconscious sort through it and figure out what makes sense as a direction is incredibly valuable. So the car time is really valuable in that regard. I take, it's a lot of work. I mean, there's days where I'm like, I should just get my CDL license and, put a trailer in the back and move some goods around the Southeast too. But for the most part, it's a good experience, and I like that thought processing time to figure out where do we go next. So that's how I use it.
Well, I will take that and run with it in terms of putting the trailer on the back. And you mentioned talking with vendors. How are you looking at incremental revenue opportunities to where you can bring things to the league, bring things to your schools to enhance their experiences?
So there's a few things that we're doing right now. So one is our current television agreement with ESPN is starting to head into an exclusive negotiating period. We're hopeful that'll be a revenue opportunity, but I also don't have any illusions that it's going to be a 10x increase. Like, that's not happening, but that's a piece of the equation. Our championships, I felt, have been significantly undervalued for some time, and really out in the world of sports tourism, there are a lot of people using the heads and beds model, and they want you to bring people to their town. They want you to bring the teams. They want you to bring the fans. So we've started to very proactively get into conversations with a lot of the sports commissions in our area and our footprint to figure out, okay, would you host a neutral site championship for us? Will you defray expenses for this? Because they want people in the restaurants. They want people in the hotels. So that's been another piece of the equation for us for sure. The other thing is we've brought our multimedia rights in-house, and we do that on our own. And so controlling some of those types of things is really where we're focused and trying to figure out what are the things. And again, we're trying to lock down the Southeast experience. Like, we are very Southern focused. And so who are the companies in our footprint? Like right now, Ingalls Markets is our title sponsor for basketball. They do an incredibly good job for us. We've got a great partnership with them. They believe in the sports approach in terms of how they take their brand and their product and their institutions and their markets and tie them to our institutions. And the footprint overlays very, very closely. So that overlay of companies, Southeastern Freight Lines, like same thing. Those types of companies, that's where we're spending time. Holston Gases, like, they're not national names, they're regional names, and that's where we're spending a lot of our conversation and a lot of our time trying to move things forward.
What's the conversation like with a lot of those brands in terms of buying into, not necessarily what you're selling, but buying into that SoCon brand and what it represents? Yeah, so
what they're, at the end of the day, like, there may be the person or the CEO or the leader who has an affinity for our conference, but at the end of the day, they're running a business. They're trying to figure out, how do I either tell a story, and that's what works well with Ingalls, for example. Ingalls is very much about the storytelling, and they're invested in the South as well. They work with community farms. They do a lot of the types of things as it relates to food insecurity, and so that's a piece that resonates with college campuses, and that's a story that works really well and blends. The hurricane experiences that happened in Asheville, incredibly devastating. Like, we are working closely with Explore Asheville, which is another one of our bigger sponsors. How do we get people to go and return to that area? They've lost billions of dollars because their peak tourism season was completely wiped out because of the hurricane. So those are the types of social opportunities and good works that our schools can get behind pretty easily, our fan bases can identify with. And again, the stability of our membership, the relationships, the history, the understanding of that history, people want to tie into that. We're a 100-plus-year-old conference. We're the fourth oldest conference in the country. And there's a value to that. And partnering with brands that have that similar type family approach, I think, works well for us.
You mentioned the hurricane. Obviously, it hit a lot of your schools pretty directly and pretty hard. What was that experience like as a commissioner? And ultimately, what was your best kind of crisis moment that you were proud of that you or your staff kind of came through with?
The thing I'm most proud of is not anything that our office did, as much as the incredibly good communication between our institutions. We had to reschedule contests. We only lost one football game, but the focus was first and foremost on making sure everybody's safe and in a good place. And then from there, understanding how were different communities hit. We had, some institutions that had some pretty significant damage, required some things to be moved. But honestly, I had to, cell service was nearly impossible to get. So I would, drive into town, there's trees down and everything else, so I could get under a cell phone tower and try and, communicate with our staff, communicate with our schools, and would do that multiple times a day. And everybody had the right attitude and the right approach. There was no, hey, how do I get competitive advantage out of this? It was simply, let's make sure everybody's in a good place. Let's figure out the right time to reschedule. Let's figure out the right time to move some things forward and go from there. But, devastating losses for some of our campus and our campus communities. I have a staff member who lost his home, from the hurricane. lots of personal, individual impacts that will change people's lives forever in some incredibly difficult circumstances. We went explore Asheville, worked to put together the concert for Carolinas at the Panther Stadium and Bank of America Stadium, and just the ability to pull off an event of that scope and scale in about a month and raise, I think it was $20 million or something like that, even more. Just a remarkable ability to provide leadership in those situations. And, we tried to do the same thing at our local level, and, our schools did a great job of pulling all those things together.
We started this conversation talking about the student athlete experience a little bit. As you look forward and move ahead 4 or 5 years, how do you want that to be the same? How do you want that to change? And ultimately, what do you think the SoCon student athletes that are coming in as freshmen next year, how is their experience going to change?
It's a good question. So I think first and foremost where I would start is I hope it continues to be educationally based. I think it's really hard and really troubling to think that you're going to have a good educational experience when you go to 5 schools in 5 years. As an employer, or if you're trying to hire somebody, if you were to go and say, all right, I've got an array of people I can look at, and you see as somebody who's gone from job A to job B to job C to job D to job E, and worked at 5 different places in 5 years, I'm probably not going to look at that person as somebody as a prospective employee for my organization. I think the same thing applies here. Like your ability to build relationships, your ability to invest in a culture, your ability to make that culture better. Those are things that need to be shown. And unfortunately, we're in an environment where that's really, really challenging. Where we might be 5 years from now, this is going to be a bit out there, but I'll put it out there. The Diego Pavia lawsuit right now that's challenging the question of junior college eligibility counting towards your 5-year clock. I think the notion of having 4 years of eligibility or a 5-year clock is something we've got to talk about. And I realize that doesn't necessarily work for every institution, but we're in the education business. And so if I'm somebody who wants to go get a master's degree or a law degree or a doctorate or a medical degree, why should I be precluded from continuing to compete in my sport? And in fact, wouldn't we be better off having incredibly mature people who have a degree, who have figured out sort of those 18 to 22-year-old life experiences, and they're enmeshed in these teams and they're helping mentor younger student athletes and bring them forward and learn things. So, I think it's something we should talk about. I think that's probably too far afield for many, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. Like the notion of 4 years to complete your degree, that's not the norm in a lot of places anymore. We've got online learning. There's all these different dynamics. And if we think about this from an educational perspective, do we want 35-year-olds playing? Maybe, maybe not. But we do it. I mean, we already do. You can pause for military service. You can pause for a whole variety of things that your clock stops, and then you can come and compete. Doesn't happen much, but maybe we should look at that. Maybe we should think about it a little differently.
A lot to think about and talk about here at the NCAA Convention. Michael, thank you so much for joining us here on Athletic Director U.